Why does a $2 can of PAM from your kitchen cabinet outfish attractants that cost 10 times as much? It's not a gimmick. It's not internet nonsense. There's a specific compound inside that triggers a feeding response in fish, so aggressive that multiple tournament circuits have straight up banned it. And the reason it works has nothing to do with what you think. Most people assume the oil makes the bait shiny or slippery. That's the surface-level answer, and it's mostly wrong. What's actually happening is chemistry, and once you understand it, you'll never look at a can of cooking spray the same way again. I stumbled onto this about 6 years ago from a retired commercial net fisherman in Chokoloskee, Florida. Guy had been pulling fish out of the 10,000 Islands for 30 years. He kept a can of PAM in his cooler right next to his bait. I thought he was making lunch. He wasn't. After watching him outfish me 3 trips in a row, I finally asked. What he told me sent me down a rabbit hole that took 2 full seasons of testing to understand. We're going to break down exactly what's in PAM that fish respond to, why your hands might be sabotaging you even without knowing it, and how to apply it so you're not wasting product or spooking fish. And stick around to the end, because there's a trick involving where you spray it that most people get completely backwards, and fixing it roughly doubles your strike rate. The first thing you need to know is what's actually inside that can. PAM isn't just oil in an aerosol bottle. Read the ingredient list, and you'll find canola oil, soy lecithin, dimethylsilicone, and a propellant. Most of those don't matter much for fishing. One of them matters enormously. Soy lecithin. Lecithin is a phospholipid. If that word means nothing to you, think of it this way. Every living cell in every baitfish, crawdad, and insect larva swimming in your lake is wrapped in a thin membrane made of phospholipids. It's the outer skin of the cell, the barrier between the inside and the outside. When a baitfish gets injured, when a heron clips one at the surface, or a bigger fish takes a swipe and misses, those cell membranes rupture. Phospholipids pour into the surrounding water, and every predator within sensing range picks up that signal instantly. It's a damage alarm, a chemical broadcast that screams something nearby is wounded, slow, and easy to catch. That's what the lecithin in PAM mimics. When you spray it on a soft plastic, you're not adding flavor. You're not making it shiny. You're coating your bait in the same class of molecule that a dying shad releases when its cells are breaking apart. Fish don't analyze it. They react. Millions of years of evolution wired them to close distance on that signal before a competitor gets there first. Think about that for a second. A compound that costs fractions of a penny per application, and it speaks the same chemical language as a wounded baitfish. You've probably felt this without knowing what it was. You've had days where the first cast with a fresh bait gets hammered, and then the bites taper off over the next 30 minutes, even though you haven't moved an inch. Part of that is residual oils from your hangings wearing off the plastic. Part of it is whatever factory scent the bait shipped with dissipating. But a big part of it is that the phospholipid-like compounds on a fresh bait break down fast in water. Spray a light coat of PAM, and you're resetting that clock. Every 5 or 6 casts, one quick burst, and you're back to fresh out-of-the-package performance. A buddy of mine and I ran a side-by-side on Lake Okeechobee over 4 Saturday mornings last March. Same boat, sitting 3 feet apart. Same rods, same Strike King Rage Craws in green pumpkin. His were untreated. Mine got a 1-second burst of PAM every 5th cast. Over those 4 sessions, I logged a 34% higher hookup rate. Not total bites, hookups, fish that committed hard enough to stay pinned. His fish were bumping the bait and turning away. Mine were eating it. The gap wasn't obvious in the first hour each morning. By hour 3, once the sun got higher and fish turned more cautious, the difference was impossible to ignore. That's the pattern I've seen repeated across different lakes and different seasons. PAM doesn't turn a dead day into a miracle. It turns the tough bite, the one where you're grinding for every fish, into something manageable. The application is where most people mess this up, and getting it right takes about 5 seconds. Hold the can about 8 to 10 inches from the bait. That's roughly the length of a dollar bill. Too close, and you blast the soft plastic with propellant gas, which actually repels fish for the first minute or two until it evaporates off. Too far, and most of the spray drifts past and you're wasting it. One short burst. Half a second, maybe less. You want a light mist, not a dripping bait. If the plastic looks wet and glossy, you use too much. You want it to feel barely tacky to the touch. That slight tackiness is the lecithin bonding to the surface of the soft plastic. Then let it sit for about 15 seconds before you cast. This is the step everyone skips because it feels like wasted time, but it's not. That brief wait lets the propellant gas off and allows the lecithin to settle into the pores of the plastic. Soft plastics, your Senkos, creature baits, paddle tails, they're porous materials. Under a microscope, they look like a sponge with tiny craters across the surface. The lecithin seeps into those pockets and then releases gradually underwater instead of washing off on the first retrieve. A 3-inch paddle tail, about the length of your index finger, needs 1 pass of spray. A 7-inch ribbon tail worm, roughly the distance from your wrist to just past your elbow, needs 2 passes, 1 on each side. A creature bait with lots of appendages, like a missile bait's D-bomb, spray it from behind, so the mist gets between the flapping legs and arm-like extensions where water flows through during the retrieve. That's the zone where fish are detecting the signal from. One thing I want to be upfront about. I'm not entirely sure why the dimethyl silicone in PAM doesn't cause problems. Silicone is synthetic, and you'd think fish would reject it, or at least notice it. My best guess, based on everything I've tested, is that the concentration is so low relative to the lecithin and canola oil that fish simply don't detect it as a separate signal. But I could be wrong about that mechanism. What I can tell you with confidence is the results are consistent enough across different bodies of water, different species, and different temperature ranges that whatever the silicone is doing, it's not scaring fish away. The tournament ban is the part that gets people fired up, so let's talk about it. Multiple competitive base circuits, including several BASS-affiliated trails and regional MLF events, have rules prohibiting the application of any foreign substance to a lure that wasn't part of its original manufacture. The language varies by organization. Some say, no spray attractants or oils. Some say, no scent additives of any kind. A handful specifically mention cooking sprays by name in their rule books. The official reasoning from tournament directors isn't that PAM works too well, although plenty of anglers have argued exactly that in forum threads that stretch on for pages. The stated position is about competitive standardization. Tournaments are designed to measure angler skill against angler skill on a level field. Once you allow chemical modification of baits, that field tilts. One competitor uses PAM, another shows up with sardine oil. A third guy brings something he fermented in a bucket behind his shed for 2 weeks. It stops being a fishing tournament and starts being a science fair. But here's what makes this worth thinking about. Most of those same tournament organizations allow commercially manufactured scent products. Gulp Alive Spray, JJ's Magic, Bang Attractant, all legal in the majority of competitive events. Look at the ingredient labels on those products. The primary active compound in several of them is soy-derived lecithin blended with fish oil or amino acid concentrates. Same base molecule, different packaging, and a barcode that says fishing product instead of cooking product. The tournament-approved version costs $8 to $14 a bottle and lasts maybe 6 to 8 outings. PAM costs $3 and lasts half a season. For recreational fishing, which covers the vast majority of us, there are 0 restrictions. You can spray anything you want on your bait. The rules only exist inside sanctioned competitive events, If you're casting off a dock on a Sunday morning, you're free and clear. If you're enjoying this so far, subscribe. We've got more of these coming. The species response is where things get interesting, and it probably doesn't line up with what you'd expect. Most people assume largemouth bass are the big winner here, and bass do respond well. But the fish I've seen the most dramatic difference with are crappie. Crappie are those plate-sized panfish, usually white or black with dark speckled markings, that school up tight around brush piles, submerged timber, and dock pilings. They're popular because they taste fantastic and they're a blast on light tackle, but they are finicky eaters. A crappie will swim up to your jig, hover an inch away, stare at it like it's reading a restaurant menu, and then turn and drift off if something seems even slightly wrong. Their mouths are paper soft, and they bite so light you sometimes don't feel it until they've already let go. What PAM does for crappie fishing is stretch that inspection window. The crappie approaches, picks up the phospholipid signal, and instead of the usual bump and reject routine, it commits. It takes the whole jig into its mouth, which gives you that extra half second to detect the bite and set the hook, that gentle upward lift of the rod tip to pin the hook in the fish's lip. A crappie guide on Santee Cooper in South Carolina, one of the best crappie fisheries on the East Coast, told me he started spraying his clients' jigs 2 seasons ago. His per-trip average climbed from around 18 fish to roughly 26. Same GPS coordinates, same 1/16-ounce jig heads, each one weighing about the same as a single penny, same minnow profile Z-Man plastics in pearl white. The only change was a 1-second spray of PAM between color rotations. Largemouth respond well in stained water where visibility drops below about 2 feet, roughly the length of a standard yardstick cut in half. In clear water, bass hunt primarily with their eyes, and the scent advantage shrinks noticeably. But once you get into tannic water, like you find across central Florida, or the sediment-heavy reservoirs in East Texas around Sam Rayburn, the lecithin signal becomes one of the primary ways bass locate your presentation. A Z-Man TRD, that stubby little mushroom-shaped bait used on a Ned rig, which is a finesse setup pairing a light mushroom head jig with a short, soft plastic, sprayed with PAM and dragged slowly along the bottom in stained water, is about as effective as legal fishing gets. Where this falls apart, and I want to be upfront about this before you waste your time in the wrong conditions, is during the spawn. Late spring, when bass and most panfish move shallow onto hard bottom to fan out beds and guard their eggs, they stop feeding almost entirely. A bass parked on a nest will smash a bait, but not because it's hungry. It sees a threat to its eggs, and it wants the intruder gone. Scent plays zero role in that decision. You could soak your bait in liquid gold, and a bedding bass wouldn't care any differently. Save the PAM for 3 weeks after the spawn ends, when fish leave the beds and start feeding hard to recover body weight. That post-spawn window, usually late May into June depending on your region, is actually one of the best times for scent-based approaches because the fish are genuinely hungry and actively cruising for food. The other situation where I've seen diminishing returns is extreme recreational boat traffic. Lake Travis in central Texas on a July Saturday, for instance. Wall-to-wall ski boats and wakeboard boats from sunrise until the sun goes down. The petroleum residue from outboard exhaust and the constant turbulence from prop wash create so much chemical interference in the upper water column that a subtle phospholipid signal gets buried. It's like trying to whisper to someone at a concert. The signal is real, but the noise drowns it. On those congested days, you're better off switching to moving baits that trigger reaction strikes through vibration and water displacement. A spinner bait with big willow leaf blades or a bladed jig that pushes water and provokes a reflexive response, rather than asking fish to follow a scent trail through engine fumes. One storage detail that makes or breaks this entire approach. Never leave the can in your truck or in a tackle bag sitting in direct sun. Temperatures above 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which the inside of a parked vehicle hits easily in any southern summer, break down the lecithin compound. It loses the phospholipid structure that makes it effective. At that point, you're just spraying canola oil, and plain oil does almost nothing useful underwater. Keep the can in a cooler, or at minimum tucked in shade. Some guys transfer a few ounces into a small, dark spray bottle, the travel-size kind from a drugstore about 3 inches tall, and tuck it into a zippered pocket in their tackle box. Works fine as long as you shake it well before each use, because the lecithin settles to the bottom when it sits. What I'm about to share is the part that turned a decent trick into something I bring on every single outing. It took me over a year of testing different application methods before it clicked, and once it did, I felt genuinely dumb for not figuring it out sooner. A handful of guys I fish with know about this. None of them volunteer it. Most people spray PAM directly on the bait. That's the obvious move, and it works. But the real advantage comes from also spraying your line. Not the whole spool, just the first 6 to 8 inches above your bait, roughly the distance from your wrist to your elbow. One quick pass. What this creates is a scent corridor. As you retrieve, that treated section of line moves through the water column slightly ahead of and above the bait itself. Fish approaching from the side or from downstream encounter the phospholipid trail on the line first, and it guides them straight to the bait like runway lights leading a plane to the tarmac. Without the line treatment, fish sometimes detect the bait but approach from awkward angles that don't produce clean hookups. They bump the flank, nip the tail, swipe, and miss. With the corridor effect, they're following a chemical path that naturally funnels them toward the head of the bait, right where your hook point sits. I tested this with a guide friend on the Kissimmee chain in Central Florida last November. 3 mornings, controlled as well as you can control anything on a live body of water. Same stretch of shoreline, same Ned rigs. Morning 1, PAM on bait only. Morning 2, PAM on the leader section of line only. Morning 3, both bait and line treated. The first 2 mornings produced similar numbers, within a fish or 2 of each other. Morning 3 jumped by 47% in hookup rate compared to bait only. And the character of the bites changed. Fewer short strikes, those frustrating taps where the fish grabs the tail and lets go before you can react. They were committing mouth first because the corridor brought them in on a direct line to the hook. One detail on compatibility. This line trick only works with monofilament or fluorocarbon, which is the clear, stiffer line that sinks. Braided line, the tightly woven, rope-like stuff with 0 stretch, has too smooth a surface for the spray to grip. The weave pattern wicks the liquid away before it can bond. If you're running a braid to fluorocarbon leader setup, which a lot of anglers prefer for the sensitivity of braid with the invisibility of fluoro, just spray the leader section. That's your delivery zone anyway, since it's the line closest to the bait. The cost comparison over time is worth looking at. A can of PAM runs between $2 and $3 and lasts roughly 50 to 60 trips at the application rate I described. The leading commercial fish attractant spray costs about $12 for a small bottle that gets you through maybe 8 outings. Over a full season, say 30 trips, the commercial route costs you around $45. PAM covers the same season for about $1.50. Stretch that over 10 years of regular Saturday fishing, and you're looking at roughly $450 on the commercial stuff versus $15 on PAM. That's real money you could put toward better line, a real service, or just more gas to get to the lake. Go try it this Saturday. 1 can from the pantry, 1 morning at your usual spot. Spray the bait. Spray 6 inches of leader. Give it 15 seconds to bond, and fish the way you normally would. Count your bites and hold it up against a typical outing. The numbers are going to answer every question you have left.